Ben.
Yeah,
there we
there
go.
we go.
It was delayed.
There we go.
All right.
There
We're
we
ready. We're on Facebook. We're on
Facebook now.
Q, Ben. We're ready.
All right. Welcome to another edition of WCM Fireside Chats. Today's really special because it's my birthday. So,
I noticed that. I was waiting to congratulate you on your birthday instead of on Slack when we actually got here, so I could be publicly recognized for actually saying happy birthday. How old are you?
37. So
you're old.
I know I am old. So the kid I have, the kids make me feel older too because they run circles around me all the time.
Don, how old are you? 36? You're 36, right, Don?
I wish I was, yeah.
We'll go with that for the show. It's fine. Nobody knows.
So we have Don Bennett here with us today. Don Bennett Jr., CEO and president of the Campground Owners of New York. And he also owns a campground. Don, can you just tell me the name of your campground again, or else I'll screw it up?
Yes, it's Canisius Lake Campground.
And how many sites did you tell me you had?
140.
140, okay. And where is that located in the state?
Western New York, directly south of Rochester. It's on the westernmost Finger Lake in the New York Finger Lakes region.
Okay. I thought it was in the Finger Lakes region, but I didn't want to screw it up and say it was in the Finger Lakes region. I guess, Andy, you also own and operate Anderson's brochure distribution. What's the exact name of that again? I know
you got it. I think you got it.
You nailed it.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, you stay busy. So it's great that you're able to take some time out to join us here. And I know we've just been focused on so many things related to COVID-19 through our show so far. And I think some of the stuff we wanted to catch up with you on was just maybe, what you've been doing on the Coney side, and then also talking about this new 14-day quarantine rule that New York has. I think there's 16, 17 states that's involved in that.
Keeps growing.
What?
Keeps growing.
Yeah, it keeps growing. So I guess just to start, maybe we just get into kind of that 14-day quarantine rule. I guess how's that impacted campgrounds in the state of New York? And as a campground owner, what's involved with, trying to enforce something like that?
The quarantine is actually pretty tough on a holistic approach for travel tourism. A lot of families that were hoping to, maybe even take a week off and shoot to Florida, shoot to New York, wherever. It's basically canceled all of that, unfortunately. In the campground and RV sector, what's occurred is a lot of and campgrounds are not created equal. So It depends on the market. So the more transient campgrounds where people come from further, for whether it be near New York City, whether it be Niagara Falls, the big tourist areas are really impacted by the quarantine because a lot of people's summer plans, they with the COVID and all this pandemic, they've decided not to fly. They've decided to get an RV. They've decided that they'd like to just drive versus, another means of travel. And so I really think that a lot of the campgrounds that do have a lot of transient guests have had to, mostly the guests are the ones canceling the reservations, but a lot of the campground management staff, they've had to be proactive in calling the out-of-state guests.
Yeah.
Right now, I know pretty lame, but I'll read, if you're all right, I'll read the 16 states. Arkansas, Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Idaho, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Nevada, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah are the 16 states. And they look at that on a weekly basis. Every 7 days, they'll look and see what the rate of tests and how they come out in the other states to see if there's another state to either add or if a state improves to come off of that number.
So I guess on the campground owner perspective, does that mean they're checking like licenses and license plates when they get to the campgrounds and recording information? I mean, what's that look like, I guess, on the enforcement?
Well, do you want to ask should be or are? Because those are two different questions.
Yeah. Should they and are they doing that?
For the most part, there are fines. that can be imposed, whether it be health department, local police, state police. They were checking at the border, different things, finding out where people came from. We had given guidance to our the CONI members that if, for instance, somebody was coming from Florida and they basically need to do a 14-day quarantine. If, for instance, they stay 7 days in Virginia, another 7 in Pennsylvania, and then they come to New York, as long as they keep their receipts of where they've been, they wouldn't have to quarantine if they've already met the 14 days in an approved state or a state that's not an issue. And again, it's if you're on a 2-week vacation, I don't think you really want to come and quarantine for the entire 2 weeks in your RV. Getting food and things like that are tough.
So Don, if you're unfamiliar with how our show normally works, Ben asks the easy questions and I ask what I'm asking I don't necessarily believe, but I try to just get both perspectives of the story, right? Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. So my first question to you is campground or no campground? Is this actually an enforceable law? Because I don't think that it is.
So
is there enough people to actually do this?
So the answer, honestly, is no. I don't believe that there is.
Right.
However, if there is something that happens, we're seeing a lot more police presence at the campgrounds, just basically driving through because camping is fortunately for our sector and our industry, camping is one of the things that, yes, there's restrictions. There's a lot of difficulties doing business, but where we are now in a lot of the phases, camping looks pretty similar to what it did last year. And in a lot of ways, there's different cleaning protocols. Don't get me wrong. There's the masks, only so many per store, but the concept of camping is pretty similar to what it has.
Yeah, it hasn't changed much.
Have you had any, I know, sometimes you read these stories where the sheriffs are like, no, we're not going to enforce that. Have you had any sheriffs come out and say, no, we're not going to bother with this?
Well, hold on, because we don't want to get any sheriffs in trouble, right? So maybe we shouldn't necessarily end that.
So I'll throw this out. There are counties that the county governments have told their county sheriffs, county local police departments that if cases are low, for instance, that maybe they would do a lot more warnings before they would think of fining. So I think that's probably a better way. Although we do have the state police that the governor, I know last week his big rant was fireworks, that, he didn't want fireworks coming in and into the state and things like that were illegal, the bigger stuff, and the booms and things like that. I guess they've been pretty rampant around New York City and places that they generally shouldn't be. So that was the big rant last week. And yes, Brian, you're absolutely right. There's not enough police officers to enforce that.
Right.
Well,
that mandate or anything. I mean, regardless of what state you're in, there's not enough people to watch.
Yeah. I guess, okay, from a campground owner's perspective too, I guess, what does it look like when the police show up at the campground? Are they allowed just to come in and start looking through license plates and paperwork, or do they have to are there certain procedures in place, I guess, that they have to follow, or?
You're asking if they have a warrant?
No, I mean, if you didn't want them in, I suppose you could say that, but if there was a time and case when a campground owner needed to call the police in, they might then decide not to come either, or be a little bit slower. So generally, you try and have good working relationships. That's kind of what I've always fostered in my leadership position with CONI. Have a good leadership position with not only your local police force, but your local health department too. And if you have a good working relationship and we could see during this pandemic that a lot of those relationships came to play and things were, a little bit more lenient, I think, if you have shown to be a good operator in the past.
What does a 14-day quarantine at a park look like? Is that basically the camper just stays in their RV at their site the entire time? They can't walk around or anything?
No. So you're asking questions that are different from every single campground, Ben.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, in general, what would that look like, I guess? I mean, it would look different for each campground, but I guess basically they're just restricted to their RV then, I guess.
Assuming
That
they
is
enforce it.
Yeah.
assuming it's enforced. What should happen is they would be restricted to their RV. They would also not be able to go get groceries. They would have to have food delivered, or they'd have to use New York. We've been Instacart. I don't know if that's across the country, but Instacart grocery buying, they would have to get that stuff delivered to right outside the door of the RV. So for the most part, we're seeing with RVers are mostly pretty independent thinkers. And we're seeing that they really don't want to come to quarantine. So they may stay in, if they're coming to New York and it's a long enough stay, they may quarantine in Virginia, Pennsylvania, somewhere along the Ohio, somewhere along the way in a let's call it an approved state that quarantine is not necessary. And that's one of the things we've been telling them, if they are doing that, keep the receipts where they've stayed before, and then they should be in good shape once they get to New York.
Okay, what would suck is, okay, let's say you go to one of the approved
days in quarantine, and then Ohio's added to the list. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're like a week in to your quarantine.
Yeah, I don't know if you can out jump that game.
Yeah, that would suck. But so I guess I imagine that's had a big impact on your transient campers, like from other states. I guess, does that mean that, your campgrounds are mainly catering to locals or like people within the state, or are they still seeing quite a bit of out-of-state traffic?
No, I think depending on where they are, Western New York sees a good amount of Western Pennsylvania, Ohio traffic, and then Eastern New York. Right now, I think Massachusetts is also pretty restrictive on who they're allowing in their state, but they're allowing New Yorkers in. Maine, I think. So we're seeing some other things. Some of our campground members of CUNY are suffering, though. Canada is not having the borders open is a very, very tough thing for some of our members. They have a lot of Canadian business. Yeah,
that doesn't, and Kara's not here this week because she's on vacation. Normally she could speak to this probably more so than Ben or I could, but I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. I mean, right now it's scheduled for the end of July, I think. But
that's correct. But I've heard it's going to be extended.
Right. Objectively speaking, if I'm Canada looking at the United States, who appears to not have it so much under control, I'm not letting United States people in. But I don't know. I mean, that's me. I mean, I understand that I would want it open if I was a campground owner, but looking at it from their side, I don't know if I would be willing to not extend it either. Do you agree, Ben? Not agree?
I mean, yeah, I guess I just don't know. I mean, we don't really have too much of a handle on it at the moment. So obviously it probably would give you a pause to open it, but hopefully they can get it open here soon, because obviously a lot of the campgrounds and a lot of the businesses right there, they depend a lot on some of that back and forth travel. So
yeah, I mean, I hope too, but it doesn't look like it's trending in the right direction, unfortunately.
I don't know. How much does that impact those campgrounds near the border, Don? Like, is it severely impacting them, or is it just a little bit of an impact, I guess?
Luckily, I think, U.S.-based business is grown this year. So I don't think in the end, I'm hoping it won't be as much, but sometimes it could be for some near the border, 30-35%. There's also, I mean, and outside the campground sector, there's thousands of people, for instance, that live in Buffalo that actually they commute to their jobs in Niagara Falls or into Canada too. So they've been impacted as well, on the cross Canadian border deals.
So is there a flip side to this though? Is there people from the United States side who would normally be going to Canada who then perhaps take their vacations in upstate New York instead?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think maybe, I'm not saying it necessarily balances out, but I think it helps a little bit too, offset that. I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
How with the snowbirds, and we won't really know the impact on the snowbirds until the fall, but I guess, do your parks have quite a few people that stop at your New York parks on the way down south?
From Canada, yes. We've got two main routes. Route 81, it basically cuts the New York in half, Western New York to Eastern New York, goes right through Syracuse. And that,
Montreal, right?
yep, from Montreal. And that's a big one. And then Quebec goes down 87, which is Eastern New York. And so we have a bunch coming through from Toronto, not so much Western, but that central hub, that Route 81 is a pretty vital one for snowbirds. So hopefully by that time, they when we get to November, December, October-ish, maybe they'll be back open the borders. But again, I'm not sure. I don't think if we all had a crystal ball, we'd probably make a lot of money and retire, right, Brian?
Well, that's true, but we can also make educated guesses, right? Because I think the idea here is not to be, at least from my perspective, it's not to be negative, and I know that comes across that sometimes when I'm talking to Ben and stuff like that, but I think it's more to help make sure that these owners are as prepared as possible. So if there's an opportunity, let's look at the Canada border, for example. If it's extended, then we've prepared them and there's an opportunity for maybe them to shift some of their marketing to attract more local New Yorkers and make up that revenue. Whereas if we just keep saying we hope, they may keep hoping and not adjust, and then they're down 30% instead of 15. Is that a good assumption, or is that? I mean, you tell me, Don.
No, it's a great assumption. We've got we've got a lot of different facets, and that's what I mentioned at the top. That all campgrounds aren't created equal. We've got several campgrounds near the Cooperstown area that rely on Little League. They have tournaments there. It's called Dreams
Baseball
Park.
Hall of Fame, yeah.
Baseball Hall of Fame and Dreams Park, and with those Dreams Park canceled for the season, those campgrounds were full to capacity every year, a year in advance. So they're now having to look at bringing locals in that they've never done before. So it's for some campgrounds, it's definitely a huge market shift. Several campgrounds were on the smaller side as far as their regular business, but they were huge concert areas. Saratoga, for instance, they will bring in the Dave Matthews Band, the Fish, a lot of the concerts that just draw thousands and thousands of people, and they would fill the campgrounds with them, and they would have shuttle service right to the concert venue for those people. And so those campgrounds are now having to move to a traditional model, and sometimes things, in that nature take time because they're not used to going to those campgrounds. They're not used to frequenting those campgrounds. So again, as a lot of places are saying that they're absolutely up and up a lot in terms of business, there are some that are struggling, and they're trying to, I guess, find, I don't say the new norm, but they're at least trying to find the norm for this year.
Right. The temporary shift to whatever we're going through. And I mean, you just pay attention to the trends, and that's all.
What is Coney, I guess, obviously, we all hope that they don't shut down campgrounds, or we don't have these wide-ranging shutdowns again. But I guess, is Coney prepared for if there is more shutdowns, or if campgrounds start having to be shut down again to essential travelers only? Have you talked with campground owners about what that looks like and what they need to prepare for?
As far as the campground owners, we haven't. We haven't talked to them too much about in case there would be another shutdown. I think for the most part, we hope to get through that vaulted Labor Day weekend. If we can get through that, I think for the most part, it'll be pretty good. We did switch lobby firms in January. We added a lobby firm that was much larger than what we had used, and so we were deemed essential back in the right off the get-go in terms of other accommodations, which if you look at the North American Industry Standards codes, other accommodation, there's only one thing under other accommodation, and that's us. There was some, with some of the government underlinks, there was some issues early on with that. And then they've actually came out and they've expanded on the essential guidance, listing campgrounds out. And then they had a few little things that they wanted to, really didn't belong in that I felt, but we left it alone as far as being able to be on the site. So in New York State, in the month of March and early April, to get businesses to be considered essential, when the businesses weren't generally going to be opening for at least a month, month and a half later, was, I felt, a pretty good feat.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree.
how can something be essential if it's not operating? So, so I do believe that if we were to have to back up a little bit, I don't think we would be the first to do that.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't see. Now, again, my answer is going to be different state to state, right? But we're talking to you. You're from New York. I think that based on what I'm seeing and what I'm reading as far as the trends and how you guys responded early in lockdown and your percent positive rate and all those kinds of things. For one, I think campgrounds in general are going to be one of the last places to be shut down again. But specific to New York, I think you're even in a better position than a lot of the states where they're spiking, Florida, Texas, Arizona, those kinds of things, because your percent positive remains so low. And even if in a worst case scenario, you followed some of these other states who spiked 4 to 6 weeks after they opened, that still puts you right at the edge of Labor Day. And so I think even if that situation comes up, I don't think you're going to be considered to be shut down until September anyway. So,
right. At the very worst case. The other thing too, I think things were so bad in New York City and New York State at the onset of this that I think for the most part, the stigma of wearing the mask, the face mask in public where it's needed, where it's warranted, I think, you know, I've seen people that would have been a little bit harder stance that I'm never going to wear a mask to they're actually doing it. And I think they're seeing it, and the governor, you know, he's done some great stuff. He's done some not great stuff, but Governor Cuomo, I think, has done a pretty good job of giving us as business owners tools. Other states that, you know, the masks are not mandatory. The governor made them mandatory in the state. So if somebody comes into a campground store and the campground owner doesn't have to be the one that's the bad guy, like, hey, we want you to wear a mask. We're trying to keep our staff safe. We're trying to keep our family safe. We're trying to keep you safe as our guest and our customer. That by putting the onus on the governor to make that mandatory, it kind of takes it off the business owner, which I thought was pretty insightful on his part and pretty helpful. You know, you'd never think as a campground owner you'd be spending a couple $1,000s on face masks.
right.
You know, but it's just something that we have to do. You know, we were able to be the recipient. If you watch Governor Cuomo at all, he had the guys in the jails making the New York hand sanitizer, and most of the campgrounds have that stuff. And I got to tell you, it does smell like jail.
Yeah. I mean, what you say is absolutely true. Like, I mean, regardless of how, you know, again, everybody does things wrong, everybody does things right. How you feel about how Kumo did it is a whole other story. But what he did was he was consistent with his messaging. At least it appeared to me from the outside. And he said the same thing over and over again. He was very clear with his descriptions. And so I think that combined with what you're talking about with the spike in New York City and the fact that a lot of people in New York know somebody who was in the hospital or went through this has made it a whole lot easier on business owners and, again, to avoid that stigma.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
What was it like working with the state governor's office, I guess, at the onset of this? I know you got a new lobbying firm. I guess, were they pretty receptive to everything you guys were sending along, and were they listening? And did you have those relationships in place that really helped at the onset, I guess?
So the new lobby firm, we went from a fellow, and we still use the other fellow for, we had a ADA website lawsuits many of our members were hit with last year, and we still use the lobbyist that we've used for 25 years for that. But the new lobbyist is where we're headed. So we went from a one-man shop to a firm that has over 2,200 attorneys, 42 offices worldwide, and many of the folks that are in the office up to even 2 months ago worked in the governor's office. So the access was amazing that we were able to get. The legislative aide that I work with, she wrote 3 or 4 of the governor's executive orders. So the access that we now have is much greater. And where that really helped us is by the emergency orders that were issued by the state legislature, they took themselves out of the game. So the state legislator, the state senators, state assembly people that represent, that are in the districts where the campgrounds are located, were moved. So it was really all working with the governor's office. Again, we were essential at first. Where we had a little hiccup was basically in early April, campgrounds were opening in the eastern part of New York State, that may be an hour to 2 hours from New York City. The locals called the governor's office, called the local governments, and they wanted these campgrounds shut down. They were worried people were fleeing New York City. They didn't want them to come and buy their toilet paper, buy their food, and infect them. So the governor's office had received thousands of calls stating that how can a campground be essential when they're not opening? We don't want people moving around. So we made a lot of the cases that a lot of the other states made with, we found several traveling nurses and those guys. We found campsites, places for people to quarantine. We had a father that took his son that had several health issues that, the child was, I think, 10 or 11 years old, went to a campground. They quarantined in their RV until things loosened up and got a little bit safer for them to return home. So we made all the cases that we could, but the governor's office, they even didn't come out and give us a reaffirmation, nor did they give a reaffirmation to their own Empire State Development, which is the governor's underlinks, if you will, out in the regions that were managing things. So we were able to keep seasonal camping at first, and then each county, and this was the tough part, I guess, for our office, each county was without guidance from reaffirmation. Each county was doing something different, their health department and their local government. So we had 62 different counties that we were trying to work with to get them to reopen the campgrounds, or in a different way. Governor Cuomo did, again, based on they were looking for, he always likes to give something back and have a positive note to some of his weekend updates and things like that. So I think it was Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, he came out and said, yeah, all the campgrounds should be open in RV parks. And so that gave the green light where, his underlinks at Empire State didn't even know that announcement was coming. And that was a direct piece that we were able to get from the lobbyists in their help with their connections. A couple of weeks later, we were able to add swimming pools and playgrounds to that too. So it's been a definitely difficult road getting everybody to the point of reopening, and there's still cleaning standards. There's a lot of differences. Some counties you have to disinfect common bathrooms twice a day. Some you have to do it hourly. And even the head of environmental health in New York State, said to me on the phone, he goes, hourly is ridiculous. Even the CDC has come out and said they don't think you can really get it from surfaces, but he said those counties want to keep doing that, so they'll, for now they'll keep doing that. And that was really where we kind of circled around in New York.
Yeah. So, and then you also operate the Anderson's brochure distribution brochure service. I guess, how has that been impacted by COVID-19? I know a lot of the RV shows, a lot of the, traditional places. What was that?
I said a lot of the distribution points.
Yeah, a lot of the distribution points are shutting down. They're not holding their events. So I guess, how have you had to adapt on that end?
So we actually had 26 shows on our schedule. We were able to do 20 shows. Shows were lights out. Attendance was great. We already saw the RV industry surging. What we felt with what we had heard at each of the shows, from what the number of RVs were selling, things like that. So we lost out on Doswell, Virginia. Show. We lost out on Quebec, and we lost out on York. So York is run by the Pennsylvania Campground Owners Association. That has been rescheduled for October. We have not heard if that's going to come back online or not. In our 2 fall shows that we normally did were the Allentown Fair and of course Hershey. Those 2 have been canceled as well. So what we will be doing is we're actually working on our show schedule for next year. The show promoters have been pretty excited and antsy to get contracts out and things like that for going forward. Those customers that were signed up for those 5 shows, well, it'd be 4 shows if York does happen, and we're not sure that we're still planning on it at this point. But those that signed up for those 4 shows will be given a credit for next year's shows in those. And then we'll have basically a show schedule that it'll pretty much mirror image what we've done in the past. The 26 shows have been pretty good. They've been pretty outstanding in terms of the numbers. I do think we're going to probably add the New York State Fair. They get about 2.5 million people through that each summer. So,
yeah, the good thing about this is that it happened right at the tail end of that RV show beginning of the year season. And so it did impact, am I correct? It did impact some shows, but not nearly as many as it could have if it had happened in January.
Exactly. Yeah. If it were January, we probably wouldn't be able to get to any of them. We did do 4 shows in Canada last year. I do believe we're probably going to scale back to 1 or 2 at most for next year, just because of the cross-border deal. And then we're going to try and add a couple larger shows stateside. We're looking at a couple other markets that have large shows that we'd like to attend. So that's the plan for Anderson anyway.
Do we know anything about Coney's show yet?
Yes, Coney's conference is scheduled for October 26th to the 28th. We had a board meeting last week, and that everybody felt that it was too early to cancel. We know Arvik and KOA had canceled theirs, or maybe I shouldn't say canceled, but are shifting methodology to go virtual digital shows. But I think there's a common thread through our board that if we're able to do it, we'd actually like to try and do it almost from a therapy thought. I was having campground owners call right after Memorial Day saying, man, is it Labor Day yet? This has got to be over. We're so stressed, and this has been such a year. So we're still, working on ways that we can definitely have the conference in person. I do think it would almost be therapeutic for members to be able to get there. We do have a few ideas. We're going to be in Niagara Falls this year. The cool part about that is the Niagara Falls Conference Center, which we have the whole thing. We normally might use maybe 10,000 square feet for a trade show. The conference center has over 30,000 square feet. So if we have to spread the booths out and do some different things like that, we'd still be able to do that. They have a lot of different rooms for the education seminars and things like that too. So we are prepared. We've got a few speakers that are already lined up that have done a few things virtually already. And so if we have to go that route, we will. But I don't think from talking to our board last week, not one person wants to do that. We do understand if the climate and health doesn't improve, that obviously that's going to impact the number of exhibitors that would be able to come in that may be from out of state or to be able to travel in that. But at this point, we're looking forward to an in-person show, and we might be the anomaly for this year as far as what we can do in person. So,
well, I think you're in a good position to do that from your, at least right now as it stands today, from New York's low positivity rate and the steps that you're taking and things like that. You do bring up a good point about vendors flying in from out of state and what the quarantine rules would be and all that, but that's too early to decide that. So I think you're right. You might be in a unique situation if your positivity rate stays low to maybe be considering it.
Yeah, as long as, they don't have the fall surge or anything, or Ben,
don't get Ben. You're not. I'm supposed to be the negative one.
I know. You're supposed to be the negative one. We'll let you stay negative, Brian.
Thank you.
I guess so. I mean, I lost my train of thought. Thanks, Brian. Thank you for interrupting. You know, I'm getting older. You know, I can't do this.
We'll let Don host it. He's younger than.
So, I guess, what are you hearing from the campground owners as far as just how their campers are? You know, is there real excitement from the campers to be at the campground, and are they following the social distancing rules? And have there been any issues?
There have been a couple small issues. I haven't heard of a whole lot. A couple things that, you know, sometimes members bring things on themselves. You know, not requiring masks in a store, or not requiring employees to wear them, and things like that. I have heard of a couple incidents with that, but other than that, I really haven't heard of too many incidents. One of the things we saw early on is the private campground sector in New York. Basically, just to give you a little parameter, the state park system is split into two. There's a DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, then the Office of Park and Rec. They each operate about 8,500 campsites themselves. So they have about 17,000 campsites that the state runs. And so in our membership, we're, you know, in the high mid to upper 30,000s of campsites. So it's pretty significant. But they did not open as early as the private sector was allowed to open. So we had some of their customers, and unfortunately, I think the respect level for facilities wasn't there. So we were seeing a little bit of that. People are really excited to get outdoors. Yep. They're really excited to be at the campgrounds. One of the things, and you know, the governor in our state is constantly in those talks where things would be over and over again. He'd said, you know, we need to come out of this better and smarter than what we did before, and things probably will change. One of the things that we've seen is a lot of the activities have been canceled that the campgrounds do. Some of the bands and the dances and just gatherings and things like that, because we're up to 50 now that would be allowed in a gathering, but you're still supposed to wear masks, social distance. And so I don't know if going forward as much emphasis on the activities is going to be necessary. I think, you know, people have been just so jacked to be able to get away from home, and you know, it's the theme is the same. You hear it over and over again, but you know, when you changed your sheets in the RV, you know who slept in it last. You're not worrying about a housekeeper coming in that's been exposed to every other room on the floor that person would clean. Right. And so I think, you know, when we're seeing a huge spike in RV sales, we're getting phone calls now that, you know, when they rent a $35, $40 tent site, they're asking if the tent is included. And so, I mean, these are people that have never camped before. So, you know, we're finding that each weekend you know, people are teaching the new RV owners, the campground owners and the staffs how to use the RVs, how to get them set up, how to drive with them. And the same with the tents. I don't think in New York now in a sporting goods store you can even buy a tent. It's that crazy. Bicycles, I know we're very short supply. I don't know that you'd buy a bike. RVs, again, you know, they're selling out. Boats, it's the same thing. All the outdoor stuff is just in short supply.
Do you think there's a point where the economy impacts people's ability to spend and to outdoor recreate as much as they want?
So I do believe that. Right now, a lot of people that are out of work are the beneficiaries of not only New York State unemployment, but they're also the beneficiaries of the CARES Act, the extra $600.
Which is 3 weeks. We've only got 3 weeks left of that.
That's right? Slated to expire July 31st. And I think, unfortunately, I use this analogy. If people have talked to me on the phone, I've used it hundreds of times. When at 9/11, when the first World Trade Center went down, the first thought that came to mind was, oh my gosh, I hope everybody got out okay. Of course they didn't get out okay. Right. And I think we're at that point at the moment. Once that $600 stops, they've talked about extending it, And unfortunately, one of the sides of the government has felt that it was about double what it should have been. And so they felt that if it's double, you've already got double the time out of the relief, out of the benefit. So I'm hoping that for everybody's sake that they basically, do something to extend it on a more limited basis.
They change their minds, we hope, right?
Yeah. But I think once that ends, I think we're going to start to see the beginning of not so good times for a lot of people, not only in spending, but I just don't think with a lot of small businesses closing, restaurants not being able to get in, and we haven't seen the fallout of that part of it yet, and it's going to.
No, that's what, and I've told Ben that before. That's what really worries me is that we're headed toward a cliff here. Really, like July 24th or 25th is when it's really going to start. Because
but I think.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, but I think I know. Yeah, positivity. I think one of the good things that campgrounds have going for them, though, too, and I'm not saying that the economic stuff won't impact the campground sector, which it will, but I'm also,
change topics completely and not even address the situation. Okay, go ahead.
No, I think it's just, where the camping is cheaper. Cheaper.
Because, I mean, if you can't afford your rent, then you can't afford your rent, whether it's a $20 tent site or not.
No. Obviously,
if you can't afford, I'm not saying this is realistic, right? I mean,
know.
It could happen, but we're trying to prepare, right?
Yeah. I'm just
something has to happen here, like either or we are going to hit a cliff at the end of July. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be them extending the unemployment, but it has to be something. Something's got to get done, I think, because it's not just the unemployment; it's the business owners that are running out of the PPP loans and. Like it's everything all at once that's hitting that concerns me.
Yeah, I guess, we'll find out. Don, I guess Suzanne asked a question on her Q&A. She was asking if this pandemic is contributing to any upward trends in people using like alternate campground hosting options like Harvest Host or anything. Have you noticed any of that, I guess, on your end?
So the other campground side of it, I guess, I haven't been able to look out that far to see if that's coming, but I would have to assume that as some of the campgrounds are filling up, as I've always said, people can say they have a waiting list at their campground. Well, the campers aren't sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring. They're out doing something else or staying at another park. So yeah, I would say that it's probably booming everywhere. The Harvest Hosts, we have a bunch of the tenters in the state, and we're seeing a lot of the VRBO stuff pick up where people will put a yurt or something like that. But yeah, we're seeing
those are. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I think you froze up. Oh.
No, we're seeing more of people just want to get outside, and even if it's 30 miles from home, it's still not, they're not in their home, they're not feeling right. That they're locked in.
I think it's a super interesting question, though, Harvest Hosts in general, because yes, it's benefiting from the fact that the whole outdoor industry is benefiting, right? But it will be interesting because from what I understand about Harvest Hosts, they stay at individual businesses a lot. Is that correct, Don, or no?
Yeah, in New York, we've got thousands of wineries, so they'll stay. That's probably what we see the most in New York is the wineries.
So the interesting part to me is if we don't recover as quickly in the economy, and if some of these businesses go out of business, does that impact Harvest Host in a negative way too? Because they don't have as many places for people to go, or if wineries get shut down, or bars get shut down, or whatever. I'm not saying anybody has the answer to that. It's just an interesting thing to consider. Yes, it's probably benefiting, but it also might balance out there too, from the opposite side.
Exactly. The idea of the disruptive technology of the Harvest Host and things like that are. they only have the bare minimum. So, if you're a family looking for the amenities of the playgrounds and different activities that the campgrounds offer, and amenities, that they don't have those. And so
Right.
I think that's the the concept at this point, why the campgrounds are so active also, is the fact that they're it is not much different than what the old norm was at this point.
Yeah, there's no doubt campgrounds are much better positioned than a Harvest Host would be to weather this long term. I think it's clear. But so let me ask you a hard question, Don. Back to the quarantine, which we were talking about, which is basically the subject of this whole show, right? Is it a good thing?
Well, I think on from my perspective, we've had the scary time where things were going up thousands of cases a day. We had, I think, 800 and some deaths in a given day, and so as the governor will say, we've come off the mountain, and we have. So, is it a good thing for possibly stopping people from being infected with the coronavirus? Maybe. Is it a good thing for travel and tourism? No, it's a death knell. When you have all the hotels, all the airline flights, I think for travel and tourism overall, it's going to prolong, and it's going to make survival even that much harder. Even business travel, all that economic engine that was to the airlines are, they're not adding more flights. They're seeing, people are canceling them. So tourism wise, it's bad. The campground industry, I'm hoping that we'll continue again for this season, and then maybe we can regroup. There is some encouraging stuff about vaccine, and if we can get to that point, I think then we may be able to get back to the new normal real quick.
All right, let me ask it in a different way, because I didn't really get the answer I wanted. If it was Governor Don, would Governor Don have implemented a quarantine?
So again, I'm gonna hedge, because
oh, come on, don't hedge. I know you have to, because you want to be political. It's interesting to me. I'm not trying to really put you on the spot and back you into a corner, and I don't mean to come off that way. It's interesting to me because I see, just like you outlined very eloquently and very clearly in the answer to the last question, there are absolutely pluses and there are absolutely minuses to it. And there's no good answer either way. It's not black and white. So it just interests me is all. I'm not trying to back you into a corner.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I from seeing 800 deaths a day, that gets to the point where you're going to shut everything down. And I watched an interview on CNBC this morning with the Miami mayor, who, they're rolling things back. There's not going to be any more in-house dining, and so I guess if it were up to me, I probably would not have the quarantine. However, if we do have it, we've already gone through all the business closures. To go back again, if we had to close businesses back down, I just, a lot of them are already on pins, and they're already not going to survive. There's going to be so many things that we're going to see that's going to go out. I mean, we still can't have shopping malls in New York are open, and we're through phase 4.
Right.
At some point, the bricks and mortar stuff were already struggling. Movie theaters, the same thing. They were already struggling. Yeah. So how much longer can they really stay shut down? There's not any more, there's not any more stimulus. As you said, the payroll protection program is over. How can they keep raising capital to keep paying the bills? And so I guess from a business perspective of what can we save, that's where I probably am in favor of the quarantine, because I don't want it to spike. And if all the science and math is true, and that's the hard part. Some people, they don't believe a bit of this. They think it's all fabricated. And I understand, everybody has different perspective, but I guess my perspective is pro-business. And I really, as I look at that, and as I have visited campgrounds in the past, it's somebody's dream. You know, and this is, you know, not their fault, any of it. And for these businesses to have to close, and for these people to lose everything that they've worked hard and built, is a shame. So for that, I guess I'd be in favor of it.
Right. I mean, here's the thing. Like Ben will probably be surprised by this. I'm against the quarantine, but the reason that I'm against it is mostly because I don't think it's enforceable. So if it's not enforceable, as we've already discussed, with not enough people and, you know, all that kind of stuff, then what's the point in doing it? Because it does more harm than good.
And I think it's not enforceable for the tracking mechanism. So it's really easy. It's really easy to enforce the airplanes, because you know where they're coming from, and you know where they're going to, and you've got the ticketing, and you've got that. So the one thing that, you know, with all I do scares the heck out of me is the cell phones, and, you know, with the tracking. So if I have to go to grocery store or the post office or the bank, I don't even take the cell phone with me anymore. You know, we just kind of leave it sit there because of the contract tracing and things like that they have.
Yep.
You know, nobody wants that phone call from their health department that says, hey, go home and quarantine yourself because you were near somebody that's now tested positive for this.
Well, but the flip side is do you want to know that, or you just want to not know that? I'm not suggesting, I'm in favor of either one. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I guess for me, I don't want to know.
I don't want to know that it's kind of creepy when they track you like that, and you get notices and stuff. You're like, oh wow, they really know where I'm at all times of the day, I guess. But
you can, to be fair, you can turn it off on your phone, and contact tracing.
You can turn it on.
Google is opt-in, and so you do have ways to protect yourself, not from the NSA necessarily, but
how does
on Google, and
how does your relationships, I imagine you have a pretty good relationship with Joanne Delvesio at the New Jersey Campground Owners Association, correct? And some of the other associations. How has that kind of helped as a region, I guess, throughout this whole process?
Actually, the neat thing is the camp group, Campground Association Management Professionals, it's all the state directors basically in the states. It's really worked out well. We've been able to find out what each of the states were doing and collaborate, things like that. So we worked with Joanne quite a bit in New Jersey early on, and also Jason and Beverly in Pennsylvania. You know, we did some phone calls, worked with them, figured out what was going on, and in some of the lobbying efforts, it actually helps because, you know, when your lobbyist can pull out something from another state and say, hey, look what this state's doing, they're going through the same thing, you know, why not? I know Jim Whitney in Connecticut, marvelous job. He worked very tirelessly as well as most of the state directors did on this whole deal and getting the campgrounds open. But I know that you know, they've been doing a terrific job, and it is good to find out, you know, it's kind of best practices, or like a 20 group style thing.
There's no question that if you didn't see the value in associations before, you sure as heck do now.
Yeah, exactly. I took, I don't know how many hundreds of calls at the Coney office during this whole deal. And I didn't care whether they're members or non-members. You know, I kind of equate it to the weakest link. You know, it rises us all if we can get the non-members, and the information gap that the non-members have is unbelievable. I don't know how many campground owners call, can I open my campground? You know, and it's like, what county are you in? What, you know, what are some of the things you've done? And it's amazing what they don't know. And that's a nice recruitment piece that we're working on now. And, you know, be well informed. If you know, make the best decisions with the most information, that's the recipe for success in any business, let alone campground industry. So yeah, we're definitely hopeful to continue that. And again, you know, if we can raise all campgrounds in the state, everybody becomes better operators. It's then we can kind of train the customers how we'd like it, and you know, it's just a better experience for everybody that way.
100%.
Are you concerned about you know, campground owners obviously have been struggling a little bit. You know, the revenues might be down a little bit. Are you concerned that, you know, some of them may look at their Coney membership and think, well, maybe we'll pass this year? What's been your view on that, I guess, to try to keep that from happening, I guess, if it's possible?
Ben, if you're going to ask negative questions, you need to text them to me so I can ask them.
I got that. Okay, I'll do that from now on.
All right, go ahead, Don.
I mean, it's something that we've been hearing from a bunch of associations.
No, I know. It is a really good question, Ben, to be clear. It's a really good question.
We're actually hopeful that we normally would send dues notices out basically the end of May, beginning of June. So we're going to, the dues notice we postponed those a week. I believe that there are a number of campgrounds that are thriving right now in the state that shouldn't be part of the equation. And I think with all the work that we've done this year, as Brian said, it shouldn't even be a question whether membership is of value or not. But yes, if there are some that are struggling, we have a couple of mechanisms that we can use to help them out, whether it's a monthly billing, automatic billing type of a scenario for membership dues or something like that. So we're hopeful that we won't have too much fall off. And in fact, I'm hoping that it actually goes the opposite way. I think we've had 5 or 6 new campgrounds join since the pandemic because of the information that we were able to provide and do. I think we've had 1 or 2 campgrounds have actually sent money and said, hey, we can't afford to be members. We understand this, but we know you did all this work and we'd like to, they sent some money for us to help offset the cost of the lobbyists and things like that. So I guess maybe I look at the glass as half full more than half empty, but I'm hopeful that, we'll be able to have a pretty good model, and going forward and with continued work.
Yeah, I think you're actually in a really good position. And I'm more concerned with other states than I am with New York, primarily because you were able to lobby, you were able to get open so early, like you said, when you were essential, when you weren't even open for the most part. And then the way you handled the pandemic, you locked down, you opened back up. Campgrounds were always essential. You've got your low positivity rate. We just talked about how even if it spikes, worst case, won't happen until September. So I think that in New York, you're very well positioned, in addition to having that extra boost like we just talked about, for the fact that you're helping so many people. And there always was, but there's even more clear value now, the benefit that an association brings. I think you're in a really good position with Tony. I would be shocked if you had overall membership decline. Now, in other states, even if they were able to consider it essential, you've got Florida, Texas, Arizona, a lot of states that are spiking now right in the middle of their season. And I don't think have a clear picture of whether that's actually going to impact business or not. And so I think that's a more not interesting, but delicate conversation that could go either way.
Operationally, one of the things with Coney, I think we're one of only 2 states that, for whatever reason, years ago, the forefathers never, they had applied 3 or 4 times for nonprofit status, and because of our camping directory and newsletter ad sales, things like that, they were thrown out of, we're not successful in obtaining nonprofit status. So, we've always been zero-based budget anyway, so tax is not a big deal. But we were eligible for the PPP program, where most of the 501c6s are not. So, our board was able to take advantage of that. So, hopefully with those things and tools that, we'll be able to continue to work at a pretty good level, I'm hoping.
I think most associations will be okay and will get through this if they are willing to adapt. And just like all businesses now are having to adapt, right? We got to find money for masks or cleaning supplies or whatever has changed, of the thousands of things that we could possibly go on and list, right? I think at some point associations, depending on how this goes, might have to adapt some of their ways of spending and where they're allocating budget line items. But I think that there's a path towards survival for everybody. That's my opinion. Would you disagree or agree, Don?
No, I totally agree. I think one of the there's really three pieces to the state associations for the most part. It's education, marketing, and advocacy. We've done some surveying. The advocacy is actually the more important stuff. We always, as staff, like to think it's marketing because that's the shiny penny, the bells and whistles. But for us, really, it's advocacy and education and marketing. I think are pretty much a tied second. But the more education and that we can provide through advocacy, what they can do, what they can't do, is imperative. We've left on the member website, campconey.com, we've left the COVID page open so that non-members can get all the benefits too. Again, we don't want negative stories and things happening at any campgrounds, whether they be state or private in the state. So, during the pandemic, we really wanted to make sure that they had tools that they could operate with too. And we've collaborated and got some great stuff from, all the way back from the signs that Marshall and Sterling provided and things like that, and reopening plans through the state. A lot of different guidance that we received, and we've tried to put that in one place for the campground owners, whether they're members of Coney or not. In a good place. So that's where my hope is that, by being a good partner, that we'll be able to, not only survive, but to thrive and continue to be able to offer the great services of the lobbyist and things like that. So we've got some great stuff planned and in the works. And once we get back to normal a little bit, where they actually, legislature's in session and they have control of their third of the state, we'll be in good shape again, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm 100% on board with you there. I think I was more referencing, like, let's say convention. I mean, we've already had some RV shows that had to be canceled, some conventions that had to be canceled or go virtual. And so if there's a big budget being allocated to printing 20, 30, 50,000 guidebooks that all of a sudden now you don't have to do next year, then you can allocate that money elsewhere and kind of adapt your business to maybe providing marketing digitally, just as one example, right? But I think there's opportunities to change, and again, not that everybody needs to do that, but to change things around to survive if you need to, if that situation comes up.
Absolutely. And the advocacy stuff, Don, that you mentioned, I mean, that's nonstop. That's, you guys are doing that stuff all the time. And I know the COVID stuff has just taken the spotlight, but I imagine you guys are still working on a number of issues besides COVID on the advocacy side. I know that you mentioned earlier the ADA website stuff. I mean, at the beginning of the year, everyone was talking about the ADA stuff. Then the COVID stuff kind of came in and stole the thunder. But I mean, that stuff is still there. Those lawsuits aren't going away, I guess.
Don, did you ever think you would wake up and say, I really wish I could deal with an ADA lawsuit today?
No, I still that was really a low time for me, because it's just unfortunately so helpless that we weren't able to provide as much support and help that we would really have liked to during that. Sadly, we're starting to see the carousel come around again, and we have some of the businesses, the hotels and that were hit before, are being hit again. So we're hopeful that
you're still seeing new lawsuits being filed even during this.
Yeah, there were a few that came into hotels and wineries during this that they actually were suing for the booking engine. So if they use Expedia, for instance, and I'm not saying that Expedia, but whatever their booking engine was, that goes from their website, they were suing for that. And so that's the second round. And yeah, it was pretty tasteless to see a few of those pop up during a pandemic. But luckily, knock on wood, it hasn't been in our industry, and we do have some support. And that's the sad part, to legislate against something that's so important for some people, and the rights, and we've seen all that with the the George Floyd thing in a different method, but to see the rights that people have and what we would want to do, and as we move forward, the ADA is an important thing, but these lawsuits are not in any way made to help people. they're only to injure small businesses, and unfortunately, they're just money grabs at that point. So.
Yeah, and I think we lost Brian. I don't know where he went, but he disappeared. It's okay.
He might have only been on contract for an hour.
No, he's not on contract. This is all free. So, I guess, man, I keep losing my train of thought. It's just a Monday, so it's just the way things go for me sometimes. But I guess what else has Coney been doing throughout the the COVID-19, maybe besides the COVID stuff? What else have you guys been focused on? Obviously, you guys have a lot of advocacy stuff. Have you guys been working on other projects as well throughout the COVID-19?
We did. We had a couple of meetings that in the spring we have what we call zone meetings, where we actually move across the state, usually in the Albany area, Syracuse area, and then Western New York in the Batavia area. And we did have to cancel those meetings, but we were still able to do them virtually. We had a couple of great speakers, a couple of great sponsors for the speakers, and we had a good amount of people on. We had a few lobbyist calls. We had a few other education sessions that we did. And then we did kind of a Cracker Barrel where we asked the Facebook group moderator, the RV Park and Campground, Mark Camp, was a moderator of a Cracker Barrel that we did. So we've been trying to, give the opportunity for campground owners to hear other campgrounds questions, to be able to talk, to get together. Really the COVID and the essential business and reopening plans, that really kind of took over my world, if you will, for really a couple of months. But we're now focused again on marketing. We've been sending directories everywhere and single copies, bulk copies. We've been doing that. We're planning for the conference for the fall still, and basically getting things back up to snuff in the office that were neglected. We've got a newsletter, I think, coming out this week that we've been working on, and just a lot of different stuff that that we've been doing to continue on and to try to be a good value in an uncertain time. For a while, we every day, every other day, we still send out emails when more states get added to the quarantine or take off. So we're trying to keep everybody informed. We're using 2 different email platforms to make sure that nobody is dropped off if a certain email service doesn't go through or something like that, to make sure that everybody is able to get the information. So basically we're just trying to keep everybody as well informed as possible.
I think one of the most exciting parts, I don't think anything about the COVID-19 thing has been exciting. Maybe that's the wrong word, but I guess one of the more interesting parts is this virtual stuff that we've seen. And I think, with the virtual conferences coming up that Arvik and KOA are going to be hosting, but it's opened up so many doors to like Zoom webinars and meetings, and people are doing so much more. I mean, as a state association, there's a possibility to do even more as far as hosting maybe some webinars throughout the year and doing some educational components on that end too, or just doing like member updates through virtual stuff, through like Facebook Live like we're doing now and different things. So that'll be really interesting just to see if that sticks with the industry and if we see more of the virtual stuff, I guess. So.
Yeah, I think we will see probably more of it. I think the other thing is upgraded. We always had before the conference call, and now we can see each other a little bit better, share information a little bit better. So I think with Zoom or Facebook Live or the Microsoft Teams and everything. So I think the collaboration is out there where people maybe didn't want to do it before, were kind of forced into it. And I think, it's, I think they found it's okay. We can do that. I still don't believe we're going to be able to, we're not going to be able to take away in-person conferences eventually, because I think people like to talk to people in person, and that the social side of it's not going to end. you know,
I think it looks different. I don't know how it looks, but I think it looks different. But yeah, you're right. I'm handshake, eye contact. You know, Don. I mean, that's literally the reason I come to all the shows.
Absolutely. The RV shows are the same thing. You know, when in the north, when the RV shows happen in the winter, it's not necessarily to you know, sell RVs. It's for people to be able to get together, go out. They meet their campground friends. They plan where they're going to camp the next summer, and of course they look at the new units and stuff too and see what's available. But you know, we don't pay to go to a car dealer, but when the RV dealers are at the shows, you definitely pay for entrance fee and to get in. So I don't think, and I think that's going to, you know, increase even more. You know, I see Marcus Lemonis and Good Sam. They're you know, have a very robust show schedule for next year, and you know, they're planning right off the bat in January. So again, I think, you know, our industry, we kind of joked. I had a theme a couple of years ago that we used for some marketing, that, you know, camping, the original social media, you know, that we had. So, but I think it's, I'm very optimistic for the future of our industry, whether it's the state associations or the campgrounds, especially, and the camping customers. So,
yeah. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to the end, Brian, unless you had any other, I was thinking.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, I know that, you know, I'm in Ohio, you know, but I've been trying to dip in and out and follow my vicious dog who's going to greet the dog walker who just came to get her. I think that I've tried to dip in and out of every single state and follow as much as I humanly can, because that's something I just do normally. I read as much as possible. And so I've been trying to follow state associations as closely as I possibly can. I know that there's no question that we're lucky to have someone like you leading New York, all the advocacy that you've done, all the success that you had on early, everything that you've done to help push the industry forward, along with, of course, all your other peers too. But we're here talking about New York specifically. So I think I appreciate your time that you took out for us to let us in and let us know your thoughts. Your willingness to consider both sides of issues is important. And, you know, it's going to be critical for people like you to be able to step up and to lead and to give real solutions and have a consistent voice if the industry is going to be as successful as we all hope it will be.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, you know, the industry can come out of this better than it was before. And Don, I know with hopefully, you know, with the work you guys are doing there in Coney, you guys will be better prepared to take advantage of all that. So
we hope to. That's the plan anyway. But you know, we hope to. It's not for lack of effort and work. We're very committed and invested in, you know, seeing the success of the industry and all that come with it. So Brian, I can't thank you enough too, and Ben for the hard work that you guys do, and, you know, not only just this method, but, you know, all the information that you guys get out and all the promotion that you guys do, Brian, and Ben, you know, your group with the newspaper and you know, the emails, daily emails and stuff. It's a necessary thing to not only keep active in knowing what's going on elsewhere, but if we can understand that, then when that issue or something comes here, we may know or have already thought about how we react or can adapt to it. So it's you know, that's the cool part of, you know, even if it's history, even though it might be history of a month, a week, a day, you know, right, to be able to have that information is just invaluable.
Yeah. If anything, the COVID crisis has really taught us the value of staying informed and being involved. So with our associations, and you got to stay on top of stuff, or you're going to get into these situations. You're going to be like, what the hell do I do? So, but anyways, well, thank you, Don, for coming on, and thank you, Brian, for taking the time to co-host again. And thanks everyone for watching on Facebook and through Zoom, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. So
take care, guys. See you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ben. Happy birthday again. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Have a good rest of your week. Bye.
Bye now.